There are spoilers for The Last of Us in this video. Don't watch it if you haven't played the game yet. The Last of Us is not a game that pulls its punches. The game establishes pretty early on that anyone can die, and when characters do die, it's often in ways that are both pointless and tragic. Joel's daughter dies because of the orders of an unseen military commander. Tess dies in a last stand after she realizes she's bitten and falls into a depression. Sam's bite turns him off screen, and his death leads to the suicide of Henry moments later. Death is unfair in The Last of Us. No one's off limits, and no one is safe. After visiting the university, Joel and Ellie are disappointed to learn that the Fireflies abandoned their lab long ago. They're ambushed by scavengers and forced to fight their way out, and it's during this encounter that Joel gets tossed over a railing and impaled on a piece of rebar. The next several minutes are spent playing as Joel, barely conscious, as he and Ellie try to escape the building. The massive amounts of blood, combined with Joel's fading vision, don't make the prognosis look very good, and after escaping the university, he collapses. The screen fades to black. The action resumes in winter, an unspecified point of time in the future. You're not playing as Joel, you're playing as Ellie. She's alone in the snowy wilderness, hunting for food with nothing but a bow and an empty pistol. She spotted a deer, and you'll need to track it down and kill it. What follows is several long minutes of traipsing through the forest as you stalk the deer, moving slow enough to avoid detection and fast enough to keep up the pace. Ellie, being by herself, has no reason to talk to anyone here. We don't know her internal thoughts. We also don't know what's happened to Joel. The last we saw of him, things weren't looking good. You might think that the protagonist would be invulnerable, but the game has already proven it doesn't care about any kind of nobility in death. It would make perfect sense for Joel to have died, and for the player to assume control of Ellie to carry on their story. Ellie's all by herself, so she's not giving you any answers. You have to suffer through an entire sequence of dead silence as the tension builds for what might have happened to Joel. After stalking through the forest and wearing down the deer with arrow after arrow, you finally manage to track it down. It's limped its way into a defunct sawmill and died in the middle of a clearing. As you go to collect your prize, you are surprised by the introduction of people. Ellie, having learned from her experiences, is quick to threaten them with an arrow between the eye. Even though the older man appears nice, she's not trusting him. When the topic of trading for some deer meat surfaces, Ellie's immediate reaction is to ask for medicine, and the player breathes a sigh of relief. Joel's alive, and she needs medicine for him. He might not be in great condition, but at least he's alive. The sequence continues on into a lot of other great moments. There's a huge fight with a ton of infected, followed by the realization that David, the man you've just met, is the leader of a group you've encountered earlier. A group that wants revenge on you. You continue to play as Ellie as she tries to lure them away from Joel, and her playstyle is distinct enough that you have to learn how she works. Ellie's a lot weaker than Joel, and she's not strong enough to take down people like he is. Stealth killing enemies is a serious risk, as they might stumble into visual range while you frantically stab them and try to take them down. The sequence culminates with Ellie getting captured and her escape, at which point you fight the only real boss in the entire game. You'll also resume playing as Joel, who infiltrates the enemy encampment from the other side during a blizzard in order to save Ellie. And at this point in the game it becomes clear that he's there to save Ellie, not to save his meal ticket. The winter chapter might not be the end of The Last of Us, but it's easily the most dramatic section of the game. The visuals get a nice bump from the copious amounts of snow. It's a bit of a cheat since snow is relatively easy to make look good, but the effect isn't lessened any. It's especially vibrant during the blizzard. The limited vision that the blizzard allows you gets combined with the maze-like design of the complex. At this point in the game, you're just trying to escape. Ellie and Joel have no idea where they're going, only trying to find each other. The level design and graphics combine wonderfully with that goal. The path through the snow-fallen town is linear, but the snow blindness of the blizzard mixed with the confusing pathways of the town really enforce the fact that you don't know where you're going. If you take the time to explore every nook and cranny, you'll realize it's a limited area. But if all you're doing is trying to sneak through and avoid getting captured, it works perfectly. The implication of what's around you makes you constantly nervous about where you're going, and if you're going the right way. The section with the deer at the outset of the chapter is similarly well crafted. The Last of Us has a lot of these small, quiet moments, but I feel this one is the most effective. In a lot of games, the frequency of firefights diminishes their importance. Obviously, since it's a video game, you can die whenever you screw up. But having these punctuated moments of peace and quiet interspersed with giant waves of infected and murderous survivors makes these encounters a lot more effective than they'd otherwise be. The only way for the player to actually feel like they're in danger is to make these scenes more tense, and the greatest way to accomplish that is to build an emotional roller coaster of high and low moments throughout the game. What ultimately works so well in this winter scene is the unknown fate of Joel. As I said, it's completely possible he could be dead at this point in the story. It wouldn't be out of character to do so, and it would actually be a pretty great twist. You only learn he's alive when Ellie asks for medicine, and immediately following that conversation you're attacked by infected. That makes the infected encounter work better because now you're not just fighting to save Ellie, you're also fighting to save Joel. The same thing happens when David reveals who he is and Ellie flees back to her commandeered cabin. They've given you a tiny little bit of emotional relief, and then they snatch it away and create a much bigger problem for you to deal with. I think the winter chapter in The Last of Us is easily the best part of the game. It plays to all the strong points that the game has, namely its focus on narrative bleakness, to give us a truly great experience. Every single aspect of this scenario works together to create not just the best portion in The Last of Us, but one of the most interesting and well-crafted sequences I've played in a third-person shooter in a very long time.